All right, everybody, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. So first off, I want to say thank you for attending today's webinar on vSphere troubleshooting. And this webinar is really tailored to troubleshooting vSphere webinars in SMB and mid-market spaces. Now, we're going to be covering a lot in this webinar. So, it's not to say that it's specifically limited to that space, but the presentation is certainly tailored to that space specifically. So, my name is Andy Sirwich, and I'm joined today by Ryan Burke. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, thanks for joining us today. We're excited to have you here, and we're excited to learn all about troubleshooting vSphere today. Sounds like it'll be a good one.
It should be, hopefully.
Yeah. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'll start by covering our agenda for the day. So we've got a number of different things here. Can you advance the slide there, Ryan? Thank you, sir. So first we're going to do some speaker introductions of, myself and Ryan. We're going to talk about troubleshooting tools. We're going to talk about installation issues, troubleshooting of virtual machines themselves, storage and networking, HA, DRS, vMotion. Needless to say, we've got a really full agenda here for today. Lots of stuff to cover. And at the end, we're going to kind of finalize everything with a Q&A. Now, one real quick thing that I want to do, I want to mention about the Q&A is feel free to use the questions form and go to webinar here. As the webinar progresses, feel free to ask your questions as things go along. We'll hold the questions until the end of the webinar, and we will answer them in the time that we have provided. Now, if we don't get to your particular question today, we always do a follow-up blog post for each webinar that includes a recording of the webinar, any associated materials that were presented in the webinar, and a list of all the questions and answers that were not covered during the live broadcast. So if you ask a question and it doesn't get answered today, be sure to keep an eye out on our Altero VMware blog, and you'll see some links to that later on in the presentation. So I guess let's kick it off with some speaker introductions here, Ryan. I'll let you go ahead and go first.
All right, guys. My name is Ryan Burke, and I am actually a VMware certified instructor, and I've been a vExpert since 2012. So I've been working with the product for a while. I'm a big fan of the product. I always said, I tell people, any kind of student, or it comes through my classes that I'm more of a I'm a product advocate. I love talking about the product. So this is more of a hobby than it is a job for me. So it's one of those things where you just kind of fall in love with it. So it's fun to talk about. I've worked with the products ever since the old GSX days. I remember those very early days, and you go back to the ESX. I've been a VCP for a while now, and it's a fun product. So like Andy mentioned, we're going to go through. We've got lots of stuff. We're going to the way that I've gotten a lot of these things focused is a lot of it comes from my background. A lot of people will ask me questions. I have lots of scenarios I've broken this stuff into, and my background is also I've done consulting as well. So not only am I an instructor, but I've done consulting stuff. So I've seen stuff from SMBs all the way up to big Fortune 500 companies. So that's kind of my background, and we'll basically, it's to me, like I said, it's a fun product. If Andy said, if you've got questions, throw them out there. We'll try to get them addressed. And I've got I'm a very open, laid-back person. So if there's a question I can't get or I don't know, we'll get it for you. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. And we'll go from there. So, Andy, I'll let you do a little bit of an introduction now.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ryan. So, again, my name is Andy Sirwich. I'm a technical evangelist with Altero Software, who's the sponsor of this webinar. I'm also a Microsoft Cloud and Data Center Management MVP, and I've been in the industry for 14, 15 years now, and a lot of that time was spent not only managing Microsoft systems, but managing vSphere environments. I think Ryan's got a one-up on me, and that his vSphere experience goes back to the GSX days. I remember seeing GSX, but I never really tinkered with it a whole lot. I really cut my teeth on ESX3 and 3.5 was where I really started getting into it. So definitely a lot of good stuff. Like Ryan said, it's a fun product. I remember the first time that, I was able to organically grow a VMDK on the fly without having to, turn things off, which was amazing, But anyway, that's just an example of how it's, I think it's a fun product. But anyway, Let's talk about the sponsor. Again, Altero Software, the company I work for. We're a fast-growing developer of fantastic, very easy-to-use backup software. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about that product, you can go to altero.com/vm-backup. And I think at that point, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, and he's going to take you through the bulk of our presentation today. And again, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to start putting them in that questions form, and we'll get to them at the end. So at this point, take her away, Ryan.
All right, sounds good. So when it comes down to troubleshooting, right, there's a couple of different things that you have to think about when it comes down to vSphere. The way VMware thinks about it, and this is something that they recommend, and this is kind of their methodology, but they always try to go, they want you to think about things from a top-up or bottom-down approach. So the issue in a lot of troubleshooting cases is, where do I start? Where's my problem? Is it a VM issue? Is it a host problem? Ultimately, where do I have to go to figure out, how to fix this? So one thing that, again, VMware recommends that sometimes it's kind of cliche, but it's also something that, it has to be said, is that you need to know what things are supposed to run like, okay? So in terms of troubleshooting, it's always a good idea to go out, when you're starting, and actually get a good baseline of what the systems are supposed to run like. That's something that is, it's said over and over again. You should know what everything's run. I mean, you hear this. It's something that you're supposed to pound into your heads. But let's face it, sometimes that doesn't happen. So, you do the top down or the top up or the bottom down approach. So start with your host. If you think you've got a host problem, work yourself up to the VM. And top down is going to go out, and it's going to start with the virtual machine level. So, ESXi, in terms of issues and vSphere problems, they could be hardware problems, they could be resource contention, network issues, software bugs. Let's face it, there are bugs, configuration problems, and when it comes down to it, you've got to gather out the information. Go out, figure out, try to get as much information. So when it comes down to getting the actual information, we have a few different tools that we actually can use. Okay, it's not just the web client. That's what I want to make sure that everybody understands, is that you're not stuck with just the web client. You can use PuTTY, okay? You can SSH, use whatever your favorite SSH client is. And then you've got a couple of commands. So the big ones really are the ESXi commands. So you can run ESXi network, ESXi storage, ESXi VM. There's a lot of different ones, okay? I will say that, it's very, very difficult. I mean, they're always coming out with different things. I'm always blown away by something. There's always something where I'm like, oh, I didn't know that you could do this. You certainly don't have to memorize every single command. Same thing with PowerCLI. There's a lot of different commandlets. So if you're familiar with Windows PowerShell, you can use PowerCLI. So those are using PowerShell commandlets. Now I will briefly touch on just because I want to, but there's a tool called the vSphere Management Assistant, and that is a appliance. It's a Linux appliance. I'm talking about it now because it's still valid. Okay, VMware still supports it if you're using vSphere 6.5 and below. But they've announced, I saw I think about a month ago, that they are going to deprecate this. Okay, it's going to go away ultimately, and it's a useful tool. But in terms of support, you can use it, but it's still there. It's still valid. What you do is you can run your ESXi commands. It's kind of a nice appliance. If you have hundreds of hosts, you can push everything out and use basically the fast pass authentication inside of the management assistant. So ultimately, they found that this not really going to support it after 6.5, but it's still a good tool. It's still valid. It's still valid all the way up through 6.5. So I did put it in there. And then you have your ESXCFG commands. Those are typically deprecated, so those are still, you'll see, the problem with some of this is that you'll see documentation that still points to some of these commands, and generally you can find an equivalent ESXCLI command. So those are your different things, and obviously we also have the web client. So the web client's been around. The Windows client, I do want to briefly talk on that just for a second. The Windows client is pretty much killed off. All right, I know that sometimes brings tears to people's eyes. They're die-hard Windows client, but the web client in 6.5 is fantastic. They're moving things to HTML5. That's kind of the way to go. Now we have to talk about logs. So anytime you're doing troubleshooting stuff, we've got different types of logs. We have Windows version of vCenter, and we also have the appliance. The recommendation these days is to kind of move to the appliance. The Windows version of vCenter is it's been around. There's a lot of people that still use it. VMware actually has a migration tool that you can use that allows you to migrate between Windows versions of vCenter and the Linux appliance. And the appliance, they've got different logs. So under var log VMware, that's all the log locations, and then under Windows, it's under the user profile. So depending on where you're at, if you have Windows on vCenter or the appliance, you'll have to gather your logs if you're trying to troubleshoot. Some of the host system, the host logs that are very important. We have host D, so that's your host management logs. We've got syslog, all right, VM kernel. We've got VMK warning, so all your warning and alert log messages. We've got the VMK summary, and then vpxd.log. Okay, so your vCenter server logs are going to get pushed out. So one of the things that I cannot stress enough is, and I put it in bold there, send your logs to a syslog collector. This is a rookie mistake. What a lot of people will do is they install ESXi and they put their logs, it's running on non-persistent storage. So one of the big warnings that comes up is they install it to like a USB stick, which is a great place to install ESXi. They put it on an SD card, they put it on the on a USB stick. And the problem is that if you have a host problem, it's non-persistent. Those logs get tossed. So it's very hard if you don't have a syslog collector set up. So there's a lot of people I know. I've had lots of students, I've had lots of customers that have came through, and syslog is just a forgotten about component. Oh, I didn't know I needed to do that. Well, yes, you do. Absolutely use a syslog collector. Dump everything off to a central location if you can. All right, so we're going to go through a few installation troubleshooting tips, I guess, at this point. The way I kind of put this module together here is we're going to go through ESXi install, and we'll also talk about a vCenter installation. Okay, so the first thing we're really going to cover is our ESXi host installs. And the thing that everyone needs to know and understand is that ESXi, it installs on a lot of things. Okay, it installs on a lot of stuff. Okay, but don't expect it to run on every single thing. Okay, some of you guys probably know that. You've installed ESXi. Hey, look, it runs on my laptop. Well, fantastic. Okay, can you nest it inside VMware Workstation? Absolutely. Can you install it on desktop grade hardware? Sometimes. Okay. Now the issue is that if it's not on the hardware compatibility list, it's not officially supported. You can't expect support. I'm a big advocate of home labs. I really do. I think everybody, if you're practicing with this stuff, if you're playing with it, you should build up a home lab. Now the home labs obviously are not supported. I have old servers that are not supported as well in my home lab. And I wanted to talk briefly about the different trust levels. Okay. They have VMware certified. They have these packages called VIBs. Basically, what VIBs are, they're software packages that you can install on your ESXi host. So, for those of you who have never heard of a VIB or never used a VIB, it's basically an extension to the product. So you have certified VIBs, and essentially what that comes down to is companies will actually go out and reach out to VMware. It's kind of like Windows driver signing in a way. If you guys remember the old Windows XP days where you plug a device in and it would say something like, oh, we can make this work, but it's not really signed off yet, okay? So, you have VMware accepted, you have partner supported VIBs, so those are VIBs that are, created by a trusted partner, and then you have community supported VIBs, okay? So the community supported VIBs, in a lot of cases, you will find that your home lab stuff will fall, under the community supported VIBs. They might have a VIB out there that actually makes your old network adapters work. And if you're wondering how you get these VIBs built into your ESXi install, you use Power CLI. Okay, there's a tool called Image Builder. That's kind of the easiest way to go through and do that, but you can actually use Image Builder and build these things in. All right, so verify CPU. Go out, look at the CPU, verify your hardware. That's the biggest reason. ESXi itself is a very basic install. It very rarely ever fails. The biggest things is that because you're not running on supported hardware. Okay, if for some reason you've installed unsupported hardware, you can try restarting the host D service. Okay. But if it's on supported hardware, it's going to work. All right, it's going to work. There really shouldn't be any too big of issues. A lot of times, if you do run into a problem, sometimes they're partner-supported VIBs. You might want to contact HP or Dell, or if there's a VIB that it's getting hung on, double check that. So in terms of vCenter install, there's basically two different types of vCenter. There's the Windows version of vCenter, and then there's the appliance. Now, VMware's recommendation is to use the appliance, so that's what we're going to talk about. I also highly recommend the appliance, okay? Now in vSphere 6.5, they've split the install into two different stages. If you've never deployed 6.5, it's a different method than what you would use in earlier platforms. So we have two different stages. So the first stage, it's the appliance deployment. Okay, that's relatively straightforward. It takes a VM, you tell it what ESXi host to push the VM to, and it will actually go out, and it basically configures everything at that point. Okay, and then stage 2 is the configuration. Okay, so stage 1, you're just basically deploying the VM. So as long as you have data store space, as long as the host has capacity to power it on, stage 1, very rarely do you ever have any issues. Now stage 2 is where you have most of the problems with your vCenter install. This has gotten me before. Okay, in stage 2, if you don't have NTP set up on your vCenter boxes and you don't have NTP set up properly on your ESXi hosts, you're going to run into problems. Okay, have you met the system requirements? Okay, that has to be said. Okay, now if we go into some virtual machine troubleshooting at this point, individual VMs, you have to cover some of the basics. Okay, you got to know different files that are out there. We have VMX, that's your configuration file. The VMXF, if you're scratching your head going, what the heck is a VMXF? I've never seen this before. That's typically VMware Workstation configuration files. So if you haven't seen that kind of stuff in an ESXi environment, that's why. Okay, we've got our VMDKs, we've got our flat files. So the VMDKs are our disk descriptor. We've got our flat file where the actual data lives. We've got a BIOS file, and then if you have snapshots, okay, we'll talk a little bit later about snapshots. We've got different swap files, suspend files, and then log files, and then basically you've got to know that when you take snapshots, you can kind of see there, you're going to be eating through a lot of different data store space. Okay, there's going to be a lot of different data store space, and you want to make sure snapshots are temporary. Okay, and we'll cover that here in a bit. So snapshots are kind of our first real big things that we're starting off with. I've got scenario 1 here. And in terms of VMs, every once in a while you'll see this. Okay, you see a content ID mismatch, and it's basically saying, when you go to power on a machine, you'll get an error. It says something like, cannot open the disk. The parent virtual machine has been modified since the child was created. So what you want to do, the mismatches, they're sometimes triggered by storage vMotions, migrations, software error, and sometimes it's user action. But I'd say most of the time, in a lot of cases, it's a migration. Something failed at some point. But you'll notice that, and how do you fix this? So you're trying to power on a machine. It just happens to be a production machine. It's middle of the day. Everyone's complaining because the server's down. And this is how you do it. Okay, so it's a pretty easy fix if you're seeing this. If it says something about the not being able to power on. So to resolve it, what you do is you open up the VMware log, and it's basically going to say, there's a content ID mismatch. So look for a log or look for a warning that says something like parent SID, okay? And it'll say something like parent SID does not equal, this SID does not, this does not equal this, okay? So what you do is you actually open up your disk descriptor file, so you open up your VMDK file, and then overwrite the existing VMDK and then power on the machine, okay? And that's actually going to allow you to power it on. Now, snapshot issues are another thing, okay? And a lot of times we kind of they're I don't want to talk negatively about them, but snapshots are if I actually polled you guys right now and I asked and said, hey, how many of you guys have been negatively affected by a snapshot? I'd be willing that probably about half of you have been negatively affected by some sort of snapshot one way or another. Maybe you've forgotten about it and it became a performance issue. Or it just eats up lots of data store space. Okay, so if you try to take a snapshot and a virtual machine fails, you're going to have to go through. It'll say something like quiesce aborted. Make sure that VMware tools are running. That's the big thing. The volume shadow copy service is running. The prerequisites are met. Okay, so VMware has a KB article out there. The VSS provider is used, and make sure. I know this sounds crazy, but I've been in an environment where people have had 17 snapshots on a VM. I mean, you're going to run into performance problems because you got to think about what snapshots are. They're reading from a base disk, they're writing out to a delta. And then VMware recommends only a maximum of 32 snapshots in a chain. Okay, and for better performance, you really only want to use 2 or 3 of them. Okay, and in RDMs in physical mode, independent disks or VMs with bus sharing are not supported. Okay, so if you have an RDM in physical compatibility mode, you're not going to snapshots and backups. You're not going to be able to do that. Now, if you try to power on VMs, start by creating a test VM. Does the VM power on? Okay. So if you're having a problem with a VM powering on, I always recommend setting up essentially a dummy VM, a VM that doesn't matter to you. If the test VM powers on, check your host resources. Go out and make sure you have sufficient resources. If the test VM did power on, it's probably isolated to your machine. Okay. Check for missing files. So your VMX could be missing. Do you have disk files, or is everything out there? Are the virtual machine files locked? Now, occasionally, this is kind of a weirder scenario. This is a situation where you have one shared data store, and you basically have two ESXi hosts that are pointing to that same shared data store. What you can do is you can actually use, there's a command line tool. So what you do is you SSH in, and you can use the VMKFS tools and basically ask it who's the owner of the file. Okay, who's the user? Okay, who's using this? Okay, so what it will do is when you run that, if you look at it, there's a screen capture there. I've highlighted essentially the MAC address. Okay, so if you see all zeros in that location, that actually means that the current ESXi host that you're SSH to is the owner. And then you log into the host. If you're logging in and you say, okay, well, how do I figure out what host that is? Well, if you look at the MAC address, you can actually search in the inventory. You go to your network adapters, and you can say, well, this is the host that has that MAC address. So you log into ESXi03, and then you can kill it. Okay, so you would actually kill the actual VM process. All right. So we've got more details on how to do that in the actual ebook as well. All right. So in terms of scenario 4, virtual machines, they can be orphaned if a failover is unsuccessful. Orphan VMs, in a lot of cases, the reason they happen is an HA failure occurred. Host comes out of maintenance mode. There's some issues there, and possibly failed DRS migrations, storage failure, and then the connection is lost between the vCenter. So a simple fix for an orphan VM is to remove it, but in a lot of cases, just simply removing it isn't going to be. It's not really the best answer. If you can clean your inventory up with your orphan VMs, but in a lot of cases, those orphan VMs are going to have to be re-added back to inventory somehow if they've gotten completely lost. So you browse out to the data store and you re-register them like you normally would. All right. So storage troubleshooting. All right. So in terms of storage, how do we go out? What are our options and what are our choices? Okay. We have lots of choices for storage. All right. There's no doubt about it. We have NFS. Okay, we've got vSAN, we've got vVols, we've got VMFS. One of the common questions I get in a lot of cases is what one's easiest to use, what one is the best, and that's a loaded question. I refuse to give an answer to that one because a lot of it it's based on. I tell people, if somebody came to me and said, hey, I'm going to use NFS and I'm going to use all SSD and I'm going to use this old fiber channel SAN that only has 7,200 RPM SATA drives in it, what would you prefer? Well, a lot of it comes down to the I/O. Okay, it comes down to the IOPS more than anything, and then usability. vSAN is another very important thing to discuss, and we'll talk about some troubleshooting tools that you can use with vSAN. And what vSAN does is it takes local disks that otherwise would be pretty much useless. Okay, let's face it. In a VMware environment, you really need to have shared storage. And what vSAN does is it takes those local disks, and you have a cache tier, you have a capacity tier, and you're putting them all together, and you create this vSAN cluster. So in terms of where people are going, lots of organizations are adopting vSAN. All right, now vVols is you're still using. You have these things called protocol endpoints that you're going to be using with vVols. All right, now you can still use your traditional, if you have NFS, you can still use, NFS with vVols. You can still go through and your traditional data stores can be used, but ultimately vVols is kind of a different interface for going out. Now VMFS is still, right now, if you look at it, there's still a lot of people that have VMFS deployed. And when it comes down to storage, this is where most of it is going to probably fall these days. All right. So, you have iSCSI, you have Fiber Channel over Ethernet, Fiber Channel, and the direct attach. Now, notice how those have LUNs. Those are block-level file systems, all right, whereas NFS has got its own file system. And then, vSAN's got its own stuff built on top. And then vVols is, you're going to have storage containers. So one of the best ways to go out and troubleshoot storage is to use ESXtop. Now, you kind of have to ask yourself, where does my problem lie? Is it a host problem or is it a is the VM problem? Where is everything? I need to know. And the worst part is guessing, okay? The worst part is guessing. So one of the first things that if you're having performance problems and you're using the LUN-based stuff, so let's say you have an iSCSI array and you have one data store that everything seems to be running okay over on data store A, but when you move everything over to data store B, things are slow. Okay, what's going on there? Is it isolated? Okay, so ESX Top is one of those tools that if you haven't used it, it's like the best way to say is it's kind of like Task Manager for ESXi hosts. Okay, you type ESX Top and then you press D. It's that simple. Okay, so you type in ESX Top, you press D, and it's going to bring up this screen. Okay, so we have some different columns. We've got basically commands, so CMDS, so basically per second. So that's showing you your SCSI reservations, your locked, your string requests, and basically coming to and from the device. Okay, and then we have basically the kernel. So we can use KAVG, we can use device, and then we can go out and look at the guest operating system levels as well. So if you look at DAVG, okay, that's basically the average response time per command being sent to the device. And then if we have kernel, that's the amount of time that it spends in VM kernel. Okay, so if you start seeing high numbers really that kind of escalate up into the KAVG, the kernel, then what happens is that you kind of point your fingers at VM kernel at that point. So if you see high numbers there, 2 or 3 milliseconds, basically, do you have a host problem or is it a storage problem? And in a lot of cases, you can kind of say, well, it might be isolated by host. Now, if you're looking at your device or your DAVG, then what happens is you kind of point it, is it a SAN problem? Is it somewhere in my fabric? More than likely, I mean, you start seeing 15 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds latency over there, then, that's where you run into, some of the issues. All right. And then your guest. So at the guest level, you can look at the guest average, and that goes out, and that will actually show you everything, what the guest is actually seeing. All right. So it's kind of a cool thing. So all pass down and permanent device loss. So there are two distinct states. Okay. So permanent device loss, then we have all pass down. So permanent device loss is something where the data store is shown unavailable. The storage adapter, you have lost communication. It's removed. Basically a planned PDL is where you're basically you have an intent to remove a device that's presented to your ESXi host. And an unplanned PDL is basically where you're being things are being detached. All right, you didn't mean to do things. And then all pass down, you're unable to connect directly to the ESXi host using the vSphere client. Everything is dead, and then the ESXi host also falls offline in vCenter. Okay, so all pass down, generally pretty bad. Okay, that's a scenario where if you're trying to recover from like a PDL, like let's say you have typically a LUN that falls offline, or you have one, the host is still alive, but you have one storage that one piece of storage that's fallen offline. That's it's easy to resolve. Typically, you can rescan your storage. It could be a LUN masking thing, but all pass down I mean that the host is it's a host issue at that point. In most cases, something has fallen offline. So you might want to increase. So a couple of things. You could increase the value of the timeout. They have this MISC APO timeout value. And you can basically, what you can do is you can make it take longer. All right. So normally it goes about 140 seconds, but you can enter a value between 20 and 99,999 if you wanted to. So in some cases, you might say, if I have a problem, a lot of times it recovers after, 3 or 4 minutes and it's back online. So do you want to wait that long before you declare, things to be, completely dead? It's entirely up to you with what you want to do there. But those are a couple of different scenarios. Now, in terms of storage troubleshooting, storage is not reachable from an ESXi host. Okay. So the problem typically, is noticed when a data store falls offline. Happens a lot. Okay, sometimes you have a host, one data store falls offline, but the host is still alive. So typically the best method, what you want to start with, verify, make sure that you can see the LUN. Okay, so I've given you some commands there, ESXi storage core path list, from the host. If you run that, and then rescan your adapters. So not only can you do that at the command line, you can also do that in the web client. So you can actually go to your host, go to your storage adapters, rescan your adapter. If the data store just fell offline, I will, honestly, rescanning isn't going to do you a whole lot of good. It's not going to fix your problem. You'd want to go out. if it just randomly fell offline, in a lot of cases, it could be a network issue if you're using this. VM kernel ports. Do you have your port bindings? Did somebody change something? Is the target name spelled properly? When it comes down to it, in a lot of cases, it's silly little things like, is there a firewall now in place? If you're trying to turn it on, is the array supported? Okay, you got to make sure that if you're updating stuff, things do fall out of support. Okay, so if you have an older version of an array and you've never updated it, never done anything to it, and you're trying to move from one version, just because it was supported in the previous version doesn't mean it's going to be supported in the next version. Okay, check your VM kernel interfaces. Most cases, there's a typo, there's an IP issue. Double check that stuff. A lot of times that's where you start with. Now, NFS connectivity. So VMware supports version 3 and version 4.1. So version 3, it uses proprietary client-side cooperative locking. Okay, version 4.1, it uses server-side locking. Now, again, the million-dollar question, Ryan, which one's better? Which should I use? Well, whatever you do, you should use one or the other. Don't mix and match. Okay, do not mix and match any of this kind of stuff. It's only if you mix and match NFS versions. It's only a matter of time. It's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when you will actually have a host problem. Okay, because they use different file locking mechanisms. So NFS 4.1, a couple of things I do want to mention is that it does not currently support storage DRS, storage IO control, site recovery manager, and virtual volumes. Okay, so again, keep that in mind. I'm not going to ever rule out that it's not, all that's going to be unsupported forever, but at this point, haven't seen anything that says yes, it is supported at this point. But so that might right then and there could be like we're going to use version 3, and we're going to stick with version 3. Okay, so in a lot of cases, just make sure that you're using the right one. Okay, don't mix and match. Now, in terms of vSAN to me, I kind of mentioned earlier, I love vSAN. Okay, I'm a big advocate of vSAN. I think it's great. It's nice. It's easy to use, and in a lot of cases, it kind of transforms the whole, the software-defined cloud stuff that VMware's pushing. They have the vSAN, they've got the NSX stuff now. We've got vSphere. I mean, it's pretty sweet being able to just rack up, a box and say, this has got my compute, it's got networking, it's got my storage, it's got everything in it. All right. vSAN, in terms of troubleshooting it, in a lot of cases, the issues kind of lay down to what you have in your host. Okay. It only is as good as what you put underneath it. Okay. It's a scenario where you have to have two different types of disks generally. Okay. Most cases you have to have a capacity tier and you have to have a caching tier. Your caching tier always has to be SSD. Okay. It's got to be SSD. You've got to use SSD. Now your capacity tier, you can use slower disks. You can use HDDs. You have to have at least one SSD and one HD. Now, if you want, and with the way that SSDs are going now, SSDs are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. I mean, tomorrow SSDs are going to be cheaper than what they are today. I mean, it's just how IT works. Okay, so you could go with an all-flash vSAN, and that's where things get to be really, really, really cool. Okay, so when you're turning it on in terms of troubleshooting it, a couple of nice things about it is if you have a bad disk, you can turn on an LED. That's kind of nice. So you can walk over to a server and say, oh, hey, look, there's the disk that's bad. In terms of, the web client is really the primary tool for troubleshooting vSAN. You can go out, your ESXi vSAN. You can get it. I get asked a lot of the questions about nesting vSAN and running that inside of a lab environment. It is possible to do that. If you're running it in VMware Workstation, what's going to happen is you basically attach a VMDK to it, and you attach another VMDK to it, and obviously that is not supported. But if you're, in terms of overall, questions, I get that a lot. How can I practice with vSAN? Well, you have to go in and you can actually mark you have to mark a slow disk as an SSD. Okay, so you're basically tweaking it. There's a little button in there that says mark it as an SSD, and that will allow you to do it. Now, obviously not supported, but it allows you to help in terms of lab and learning this stuff. ESXi vSAN, that's another option. So you can clear your vSAN network configuration. You can verify your adapters. You can do a lot of cool stuff through that. There's also a Ruby vSphere console, and this is where a lot of people who've never used vSAN before, they didn't know this existed. So it's been implemented since vSphere 5.5, but you can go out and in terms of running vSAN commands, you can do it through that. And then we've got the vSAN observer. Okay, so that's also a tool that you would use inside the Ruby vSphere console. All right, so you can monitor your different metrics, disk metrics, your I/O, all that kind of stuff inside of that. All right, so I'm checking time here. So in terms of networking, we've got some network troubleshooting issues. So different scenarios here. So the first bullet point, I think it's funny because everybody laughs at it, but start with a ping, right? You have to do the simple stuff first. Networking is one of those scenarios where once it leaves the ESXi host, in a lot of cases, you have to kind of just ask yourself, do I have, you got to troubleshoot it like a physical box. You just have to. You've got to. So, does the ESXi host, does it appear correct? Check your IP, your subnet mask, your gateway. Is the uplink plugged in? I know, again, that's a scenario. I've been in environments where I know the host is set up right. I know this is done. Check the VLAN IDs. This is something that happens all the time. Check your trunk ports. All right. If you have a port group that's called production on one host and it's using VLAN 100, and you have another host that's got the same exact production port group and it's using VLAN 50, when you're migrating, the port groups are the same. But wow, it just randomly, it fell offline. What happened? It's your VLAN ID in a lot of cases. So you can actually go out and there's some command there. You can use ESXi to go out and look at your port groups. Check the trunk port, like I said. So have there been any recent changes? That's a big thing. The physical uplink adapter, is everything set properly? Speed, duplex. In most cases, you leave it at auto deploy and you forget about it. But every once in a while you have somebody who says, you have to set it at 1,000 full or something like that. If you're using NIC teaming, is it set up and configured properly? All right. I will also say, just as a pro tip, you always have to think about when you're building out an environment, whiteboard this stuff, guys. I've seen some of the best designs. They have it from a VMware design. It's fantastic. But then as soon as it leaves the ESXi host, they've got wow, look, I've got a redundant network adapter here and a redundant network adapter here. But then what they do is they run it to the same physical switch. All right, they run it to the exact same physical switch. You can't do that. All right, bad design in that case. And in a lot of cases, that's not. VMware's not going to flag you for that, but you have to think about that. So are you using supported hardware? Any driver issues? So in most cases, that's a relatively, I wouldn't say I run into that. If it was working okay, a lot of cases you might run into updates if you ever update anything, if you're going from one version to the next. If you move the VM, does an equivalent port group exist? That's another thing too. So port groups are case sensitive. If you have one host that says production and you have another host that says prod, even though as a human that hey, that's the same thing, that's the same network. VMware does not. They say, well, you can't move it between those. If everything's okay, check to make sure you don't have a physical adapter failure. Could a network adapter? Sometimes that's the case. Okay, that could be very well an issue. Maybe you have a host that's dropping connection. Okay, so occasionally an ESXi host is added. At that point, it disconnects. Okay, so typically the issue is because of lost heartbeat packets between VPXD and VPXA, so the agent and the daemon. So check your firewall ports, okay? So in a lot of cases, could you have possibly changed the port? I know in a lot of cases, VPXA.cfg, if you open that up, so in this case, there's a screenshot there, you can see the server IP and the server port. So if you double check that, make sure it's running on 902. You want to make sure that that all that is applied. So if you have no host management connectivity, so your ESXi hosts have recently fallen offline, again, have you made any changes to your VM kernel port groups? You have to have a management VM kernel port group. If you've changed that, one of the cool things is that you can do a network restore. So you can actually use the rollback. Okay, so rollback is pretty cool because if you, let's say you update the speed of the duplex, you update teaming and failover, you update your DNS, your routing settings, you change the IP settings of the management VM kernel adapter. And then you can also restore the network configuration. Okay, so rollback, people say, well, what's the difference between restore and rollback? Well, rollback can happen automatically. So if you screw something up, it can happen automatically. If you're using that. Now, if you needed to go back and you wanted to restore something manually, you can easily go back and you can say restore. All right, so you can bring that out. All right, so vCenter and ESXi troubleshooting. This is kind of in terms of where we're going, in terms of where we're going to be. This is a lot of things. A lot of people will run into issues with, powering on VMs or trying to, start services. So I see this one very frequently sometimes. And it's kind of interesting because I see this a lot more on Windows-based vCenters. There's two different types. I mentioned this earlier, guys. You have a Linux-based appliance and you have the Windows-based vCenter. So if the service fails to start, check your ODBC connection on Windows, okay? Use netstat. Is anybody stealing the ports? So every once in a while on Windows, this is the big scenario. It's one of the reasons I don't really like using the Windows version of vCenter, okay? This is one of the reasons I don't like it. You have a scenario, guys, where on Windows, let's face it, it's Windows. A lot of times it's tempting. I'm going to install this on vCenter as well. If there's a port issue here, a lot of times vCenter is going to have an issue. Sometimes it will, the actual vCenter service is going to start up, but the inventory service doesn't function. So in a lot of cases, you'll notice that when you're working with storage profiles, and you're going through, there's a KB article out there where you can actually go through and you can reset the inventory database, and that helps. So you got to make sure that both of those things are up and running. And then the other big thing too with vCenter is that you got to keep the database healthy. Okay, the database is going to continue to grow and grow and grow. So you have to continuously clean this up. So if the database isn't running at its peak, maybe vCenter takes a long time to start back up. You want to go out and clean this thing up. So there's also a KB article there. There's a script that actually VMware allows you to run. So you go out to the VMware KB, and it basically cleans up all your old stuff in your database. So before you run that, obviously take a backup and whatnot. But that works pretty good. Okay, so you don't want to use any kind of embedded database on Windows. All right, embedded databases cause problems. Okay, now what's ironic is that the embedded database on the Linux appliance, all right, is the way I would go. So people ask me all the time, what should I use an Oracle database or should I use the embedded? No, use the embedded database. An embedded database, it can handle 10,000 VMs. And if you look at Windows versions of databases for vCenter, it can handle 10,000 VMs if it's a big question there, if you have a remote SQL database. So again, one of the big reasons why people want to use the Linux appliance is that the embedded database, it covers everything from a support perspective. Okay, you can go out, you won't run into any problems. Now I will say that if you're using, one of the things during the installation, I didn't mention this, but during the install of the appliance, you can choose, do you want to use a tiny, do you want to use a large? You can put an XL, and it will change the actual CPU and memory allocations of that appliance. And, in most cases, like in lab environments, tiny works well, but in like production environments, you really wouldn't want to use a tiny Linux appliance. Another important thing I do want to mention too is, they do have a tool. I mentioned this earlier. Migrate away from the Windows version if you can. Okay, if you're wanting to move to it, it's built in now to the 6.5 installer. So if you have a SQL database and you're like, man, I really just want to get rid of this thing. I don't want it anymore. I don't want to deal with the Windows version. They've got this, basically to migrate to the VCSA. There's a big push for that, and I would highly recommend that you guys go through and do that as well. So this brings us to a scenario where troubleshooting in terms of memory. So vCenter, ESXi, a VM is experiencing issues. So we have a couple of different techniques from VMware. Transparent page sharing, we've got the balloon driver from VMware Tools, we've got compression, we've got memory swapping. All right, transparent page sharing at this point is now turned off by default. You have to go in and effectively turn it on. But what that is it's memory dedupe. It's going to dedupe off some of the memory. The balloon driver, it forces VMs to use their internal page file. So if a host, if you have one VM that's sitting there and it's not doing anything, well, the other VMs, if they're busy, then they can borrow physical memory and then make the other VM use its internal page file if it needs to. It can compress it, and then you can swap it. Swap files generally perform very poorly. A lot of times people say, well, geez, do I need them? Yes, you still need to have a swap file. You can get around that in terms of sizing. So some people say, you got to remember the swap file is equal to the amount of a virtual machine memory that you give a VM by default, okay? So if you give a VM that has no reservations, 8 gigabytes of memory, it's the swap file is going to be 8 gigabytes of disk. So people a lot of times they say, well, where'd my disk space go? I have 20 gigabytes of memory, disk file, and then I have 8 gigs of memory, and then every time I go to power this machine on, I'm eating up lots of data storage space. Yeah, that's what it does. Okay, that's the memory swap. Now, in terms of CPU metrics, again, lots of questions coming about this stuff. You have use time. Okay, so that's how much time did the virtual machine spend executing CPU cycles, on the physical CPU. You've got your co-stop contention. So that's an important one, because if you've got a VM with multiple CPUs, if you've got VMs that are trying to go through and to catch up, that's you have to think about that. In a lot of cases, I know this sounds ironic, but if you have 8 CPUs, you might actually get better performance if you're trying to shrink them down. Okay, because it's all about being able to get in and get out. Okay, if it can get in, they can schedule it and then get out. It's going to perform better. And then we've got our ready time. Okay, so ready time is a good indicator of CPU problems. So you can actually go out. The ready time is basically how much the VM is sitting there, but it's ready to execute, but it's waiting on the ESXi host. So basically everything's in queue at that point. So if you've got higher ready values, 5 milliseconds or whatnot of ready time, you're going to be sitting there. You're going to have problems. Now maybe HA. Okay, HA does not turn on or throw an error when it's enabled. So start with the network connectivity. Proper VM kernel port. Do you have that? Do you have redundancy? Is everything connected to vCenter? You're getting an error. In terms of the cluster, make sure you're using static IP addresses. If you're using DHCP, they've got to stay persistent. You need to have at least 2 ESXi hosts for HA. Otherwise, it won't allow you to do it. You do have to have Essentials Plus or higher from a licensing standpoint. And then all our data stores required for network heartbeats. Okay, so 2 heartbeat data stores are recommended. And even though HA will work with a single network adapter, just have to be careful. So some error messages, if you have insufficient resources, you want to go out, check your slot size. All right. The default now in vSphere 6.5 is to use the cluster resource percentage, which is nice because it kind of calculates the slot size automatically for you. Slot sizes, if you're kind of wondering what it is, it's basically the minimum amount of CPU and memory resources that are required. All right, to power on a VM. A lot of times I don't really recommend setting slot sizes manually unless you know that every single VM is configured identical. That's an important thing. It's like in a virtual desktop world where everything has the same. That's a good idea. And then reservations. I mentioned earlier reservations. A reservation is a minimum promise. If a VM cannot power on, check the reservation. A VM will not power on if that reservation cannot be guaranteed. Okay, it cannot be guaranteed. So that's something to something to keep in mind. Do the resources actually exist? Sometimes you don't have enough resources to power on machines. Maybe you don't. Maybe they're aggregated out of all your hosts. All right. So vMotion failures. Again, check the DCUI. Check your vMotion port group. So make sure that the IP setting's still valid. Did something happen on that network or the uplinks? Your NTP settings, again, they need to be syncing to the same source. Reservation requirements, are they met at the target host? So if you have a reservation, reservations are a great thing and they're also a bad thing at the same time. Reservations are guaranteeing that VM a certain amount of resources, but the problem is that you might not have it at the other destination host. Okay, and then check for any local resources. So in terms of vMotions, it's funny because if you have a VM that's sitting on local disk, it's very, you'd have to do basically a shared nothing migration, to go out and copy or an enhanced vMotion. All right. You'd have to go out and you'd basically have to move the data store and then move your host at the same time. But if you also another thing that gets people is CD-ROMs, ISO files. All right. So that's a big thing. I mean, those are some of the things you're going to run into in terms of ultimate troubleshooting. Those are different tips and tricks. I mean, I think in a lot of cases to get you started. To kind of wrap up, and I'll hand it back to Andy here in a minute, but you start with the simple stuff. Start with the simple stuff, then try to jump in, and I think the more and more you do it, especially if you build up a home lab or you're practicing with this kind of stuff, the more comfortable you get with it. So those are my tips. Andy, I'll hand it back to you, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Hey, thanks, Ryan. That's some great stuff and a lot of good tips in there for troubleshooting. So we got just a slide or two here about Altero VM backup, and then we've got a link to an ebook that Ryan actually put together on this very same topic, containing a lot of the information that was covered during this webinar. So yeah, I want to talk real quick about Altera VM Backup. That is our flagship product. We really focus on 4 main things here at Altera. It's got to be very efficient. It's got to be easy to use. So we really focus heavily on that. We want you to have full control of your backups, so you can manage and monitor all of your backups across VMware and Hyper-V, all from a single pane of glass. Again, kind of coming back to that ease of use idea. And we want your support experience with us to be very, very positive. I love our support team here at Altera. I have nothing but good things to say about those guys. So we really, really love to provide great positive support. And again, we're built specifically just for the small business and the mid-market segment of industry. So go ahead, next slide there, Ryan. One thing that I wanted to highlight real quick, in version 7 of our product, we introduced a new deduplication technology that we call augmented inline deduplication. We've really gotten some great storage savings on backup storage with this new technology. When we compared this with some of our competitors, we actually came in quite a bit lower than some of our major competitors with this deduplication technology. So as far as space savings go with deduplication, it's been really good for us. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can take a look at our website. I think we got one more slide. And yeah, I mentioned you could take a look at our website. If you have any questions, you're interested in taking a look at this, you can go to altera.com/vm-backup, and that'll tell you all about the product, but you can get some more specific information regarding that augmented inline deduplication as well from that link if you're interested. You can also download a copy there at /download. We have a full-featured 30-day trial, or we have a version that's free for 2 VMs forever. So a couple of different options there for you. And then I mentioned that we have an ebook specifically on this topic. Now, this was put together by Ryan. A lot of the information that was covered today, he actually went into more detail inside of this ebook. So if you'd like to get a copy of this ebook, we've got the link right there, bit.ly/vSphere Troubleshooting. So feel free to go out there, grab a copy of the ebook. A lot of great information in that book. So definitely recommend it if you are interested in grabbing a copy of that. Now, I think it's time for our Q&A. So we've got a couple of minutes here. We got 6-7 minutes left for Q&A. And again, just a reminder, if for some reason your question doesn't get answered as part of the Q&A today, we always do a follow-up blog post out on our VMware blog at altera.com/VMware. You can even sign up on that blog to get notifications for when new posts come out. So if you'd like to be notified when this post comes out containing the recording and a list of the Q&A and any associated materials, definitely be sure to sign up so you can get some notifications for when that post is ready. So with that said, I will start going through some of the questions here. And one of the first questions that we have here is about nested environments, Ryan. So people are looking for the best way to deploy ESXi hosts and vSAN in a nested environment. And when I think of that, I think of training scenarios, right? Or maybe they're given a presentation or like a proof of concept or something. What's the best way for them to do that?
A couple different ways. So in terms of usefulness, I think, Andy, if you can mute yourself real quick, because I'm getting a little bit of feedback from you. In terms of usefulness, in terms of workstation, like people always say, well, can I do it in workstation? Yeah. You can actually install ESXi. They actually have a version of VMware tools that actually runs on ESXi hosts. And I know that doesn't, does that make sense? Yeah, it's like the movie Inception. It's a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. And it works. Is it supported? You're not going to get support officially from VMware on it, but it's simple to do. You can actually install ESXi on top of ESXi. You can install vCenter on top of your ESXi host. You can easily build up a lab. You can run. The issue with nesting things on a workstation box is that you got to have memory. Okay, that's the biggest thing. If you have a laptop that has 8 gigs of memory, good luck. Good luck. You more than likely won't be able to do much because you got your operating system, you got a couple of ESXi hosts, you got to have a SAN somewhere. So typically, vSAN is a good use case for that. But again, vSAN, you're going to have more capacity ultimately to make sure you've got enough 3 or 4 hosts really to kind of do the cool stuff with it. And it is supported. You can actually do nested stuff, and just make sure you're downloading the version of ESXi that has VMware tools. That's the one I will tell you. It will help out more than anything if you do that route. So we can send some links out to that if we need to.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ryan.
Yep.
Another question here centers around permanent device loss. Now, I know you covered this in a slide, but maybe just to reiterate some of the key points from that. How does permanent device loss, how is it different from all paths down? Now, from my understanding, one of those states is recoverable with a timeout period. And one of them assumes that, okay, the SAN's dead, it's offline, it's not coming back for some reason. So what's the difference between those two?
Yeah, the big difference is that in terms of recovery and being able to recover, if you have a device, if you have one device that's down, typically your host is still alive, right? And if you have basically everything gone down, your ESXi host, that's a little bit more difficult to recover from. In most cases, you have an ESXi host that's completely down. Not only that, but your SAN, your storage, pretty much all of pass, your VMs are gone. In that case, when you have an entire host that goes down, we're looking at really an HA event, a full host event. The VMs are going to go through, they're going to restart on other hosts. Whereas with the other side, there's a really cool tool that I didn't mention, but it's VMware, the component protection aspect of HA. So you can actually go out, and if you have a scenario where one LUN is dead, but the host is still alive, you can actually have high availability to restart the affected VMs on another ESXi host. So that's kind of the big thing about it, is you're not nearly as you're not totally screwed over if you have one one device that's down anymore these days. In the old versions of vSphere 5, they didn't have that. So if you had one LUN that was down and you had 10 VMs on that, in that you were just, those VMs were done. Okay, now if you have a device loss and it picks up on one host, it can say, hey, I want to bring it up over there. So I think we've got another time for another question.
Yeah, I think so. So another one I've got here. Let's see. Okay, so on ESXi, how do you cleanly dismount a VMFS volume without it still being listed as dead or some other error condition? What's the best procedure for cleanly dismounting that VMFS volume?
All right, good question. So what I would do is they have a tool called unmount. All right, what unmount does is it actually takes it away from that particular host. So from an unmount perspective, the ironic part is with unmount, if you're taking it away, you need to move everything off of it. So it's going to give you a big warning, and it's going to say you need to move everything off. So really, if you're unmounting something, you'd want to go out and storage migrate, move everything off the LUN. All right, make sure there's nothing on the LUN, so no VM, no files, and then you unmount it. And it will actually show up as unmounted in the inventory. And the cool part is that you can do maintenance to it, and then you can always reattach it later on. Okay, so that's a good thing to do. Unmount's a pretty simple process, except for the fact that you got to wait for everything to move and migrate away.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ryan. I think that about does it for our time. Don't want to keep everybody over. But again, if there were questions that you asked that were not answered, again, we always do a follow-up blog post containing a list of the Q&A, the questions that were not answered and their associated answers. So again, keep an eye out on the Altera VMware blog for that. Again, www.altera.com/VMware. And we'll also have a copy of the recording as well. We usually get those up within a week. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So usually in the next 1 to 2 weeks, you'll see that out there with a list of all the questions that were asked and their associated answers. So again, Ryan, I want to say thanks for taking the time to come talk to us today. A lot of great information. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no problem.
So, and again, thanks to everyone for attending. We really appreciate you attending and hope it was some good information for you. And I will let you get back and enjoy the rest of your day. So have a good one, everyone, and thanks for attending.